Tucker Carlson went on a rant about how the Democratic Party is suddenly looking good. Not suddenly, but has increasingly looked good in midterm polling, and kind of tries to break down why that is. And it's fascinating because, of course, y'all know my feelings about Tucker Carlson. I think he's a massive, damaging individual and a horrible person to be getting seen on a nightly basis by millions of people. And he's become quite the figure. And he spreads horrible, hateful lies and has a horrible ideology. But he makes a lot of correct points here. And so the reason I want to show you that is because this part of the right is now recognizing the honest political landscape that exists. For a while, it was like, haha, you think that Joe Biden and the Democrats could ever do good again? Ha ha ha. The Republicans are going to beat them no matter what. And for a while, even I believed that. And then we saw a shift in the polls based on the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the gun violence that happened, and the Republicans, continual refusal to properly act on that issue, and then the anti-democratic actions by Trump, the investigation into Trump and his allies. And so we've seen a shift in that direction. So Tucker Carlson would never say the things I just listed necessarily, at least the last one, he may admit to the abortion one, are why the Democrats are surging. But he does accurately identify some things, which is interesting because I think he's recognizing that it's more beneficial to him to prepare his audience for that truth than do what is usually done in the build up to elections, which is, a blind optimism oftentimes for your team or whatever.
Unpopular presidents drag their parties to the bottom in midterm elections. That's the unchanging rule of politics. You saw it famously in 19...
And then what I love, guys, is a lot of these people, like Tucker Carlson, do this thing where anytime they want to make a point and the polls contradict that point, they say, wow, whatever. Polls schmoles. I don't have an example in my head of Tucker Carlson specifically doing that. I'm sure he has. But Trump, always does that. No, the polls aren't saying that. But then when there's a point that they want to make that the polls align with, clearly he wants to make some point about the Republican Party's failures in politically winning, or at least potentially not doing well. Then he cites the polls and says that's a good representation of kind of the sentiment within the country. To his credit, he does also cite the betting markets, which he says are often more accurate than polls.
1994, with the Republican takeover of Congress after 2 disastrous years with Bill Clinton. You saw it in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina. You saw it in 2010 after Obamacare. You saw it in 2018. So there's no question based on precedent that that's about to happen once again in 2022 in November. That's what everybody assumes. And in fact, it may well happen. We're certainly praying for it. But as of tonight, we have to be honest with you. The numbers don't show that happening. Not even close. In fact, all the indications we have right now suggest that despite Joe Biden's well-earned unpopularity, the Democratic Party still, again, as of tonight, has a strong chance of holding Congress in November. The prediction markets, which many believe are more accurate than the polls, overwhelmingly point to the Democrats keeping at least one chamber. And maybe strangest of all, as of this week, Democrats are leading Republicans nationally on the so-called generic ballot by about 4 points. So if you ask people which party do you like more, they say Democrats. And maybe that's why Democrats are raising a lot more money, too. And not just money from their patrons in big tech, but from small dollar donors. That's bad. In June, Democrats raised $64 million online from 4 million people. That same month, this June, Republicans raised only $26 million online from just over 1 million donors. From the first quarter to the second quarter of this year, donations to the Republican Party dropped by more than 12%. By contrast, donations to the Democratic Party are up more than 20%. That is not good at all, not simply because you need money to run a political campaign, but because money is to some extent a measure of commitment and intensity.
So I showed that whole clip because he actually breaks down a couple things that are true, which is rare on his show, and walks through a number of different indicators that the Democrats might do better than expected a few months ago or than history kind of shows. So the fact about the party that gets the White House often doesn't do well in the next midterms. Multiple reasons why that is, but that's definitely historically the case. It's very rare that the party who won the White House two years later does well in the midterms. And so for the Democrats right now, doing well would be holding both chambers, or even holding one chamber would be good, but holding both obviously would be ideal. And so the fact that they have a chance of doing that is not common historically at all. So we'll take a look here at the 538 generic ballot congressional poll, which just says generally would you vote for the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, and it does that poll nationally. And so you can see in the build-up, I'll explain for our podcast listeners, but people can see this on the screen. When you see as time goes on, this gap just closed, and then now the Democrats are leading by a thin little margin. And again, 538 averages a bunch of different pollsters. So it's more conservative pollsters who lean that direction, more liberal, and averages them all together. And so you can see with this average of all the polls, or all the prominent ones, the Democrats now have taken a little lead. And then when you look at just the Senate, their likelihood to win, it has that the Democrats 63 in 100 likelihood to win, and the Republicans 37 out of 100 as far as their chances go to win. And so that's pretty wild. The Democrats are leading in their chances based on polling to win. And as he said, the betting markets have gone in that direction as time has gone on, and fundraising seems to also be going that direction. So I've talked about the reasons that I believe it to be are, number one, the economy now is getting a little bit better, started heading a little bit in the right direction, which is always a good thing for the party that is in power. Obviously still things are not where we want them to be, but employment is super high. So unemployment has gone down back to record lows. So that is a great economic factor as it is. And then the other ones, while still not great, inflation is still high, gas prices are still high, are starting to drop, are starting to go in the correct direction, which I think people are feeling and are, glad about. And so that added on to Roe v. Wade being overturned. We saw the unprecedented level of voter turnout in Kansas to protect abortion rights in Kansas, in a red state. Wild. And I just think it motivates people a lot more than anyone expected. And then, like I said, the mass shootings that Republicans don't want to fully address. And then the anti-democratic actions and the threat that Donald Trump and his movement pose to our democracy. I think all those things combined are why we're seeing a situation where somehow the Democrats have a chance, and right now have a better chance than Republicans, than doing well, than doing well in the midterms, which is awesome. And so I think as it stands, they have a better chance of keeping the Senate than the House. Just some of the Senate candidates running for the Republican Party, I have no chance, honestly. They're just so bad. And then the House, now maybe the Democrats can keep it, which is just awesome and crazy. And it would be really nice to see another 2 years where the Democrats have an opportunity to continue fighting for more things. And I say that because they haven't gotten done what they should have gotten done. While there are major accomplishments, they haven't. And as I've explained, a lot of that is due to Joe Manchin's obstructionism, as well as Kirsten Sinema's. So in an amazing world, one more senator or two more senators would get into the Senate from the Democratic Party. If they had 51 votes, 52 votes in the Senate, instead of that thin 50-50 margin where Kamala Harris has to do the tiebreaker vote, then maybe you make Manchin and Kirsten Sinema less powerful and you allow more things to get done, which would be really great, because we need a lot of the things that Biden promised, and it's really aggravating that those things haven't been able to get followed through on. But hope for the midterms, hope for the idea of the Republican Party not getting back in power with the danger that is posed right now by this really far right that has risen so much to prominence. And even Tucker Carlson recognizes those facts, which is pretty fascinating.